In a universe filled with thousands of star systems, there was a species called the Qatar. Their world, Taxion, was nothing short of hell. Its gravity was twice the galactic standard. The planet teemed with predators armed with venomous spines. The climate shifted unpredictably, and even the oceans were filled with creatures capable of easily dispatching anyone daring enough to enter their waters. Only the strongest Qatar survived, and it was precisely because of these conditions that their species considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution. They knew no fear. They believed they were the only ones in the galaxy capable of surviving and thriving on a death world. Other alien species the Qatar encountered seemed to them pitiful, fragile, and utterly incapable of enduring even 10 minutes on Taxion. The Qatar felt neither admiration nor friendship, they only despised the weak. Everything changed the day their reconnaissance ship detected an unusual signal from a neighboring star system. The signal originated from an unknown species that called themselves humans. Initially, the Qatar assumed it was yet another primitive civilization that would quickly fall to their superiority. Their curiosity was piqued only by the fact that this species had dared to explore space despite their apparent biological frailty. They sent a delegation, not so much to establish contact as to assess how pitiful these humans truly were. When the Qatar cruiser exited hyperspace, the humans were already waiting for them. The Terran fleet was far more advanced than the Qatar had anticipated. The humans greeted them calmly yet confidently, as if they already knew who they were dealing with. This was unusual. Most other species began trembling at the mere sight of the massive and intimidating Qatar. Yet these humans seemed utterly unimpressed. Negotiations began. As always, the Qatar spoke with arrogance. They explained that Taxion was a world where no human could survive even a second, that their race existed solely because of endless struggle for survival. They even offered the humans protection, assuming that this offer would be gratefully accepted. But the humans' response was unexpected. The Terran representative, a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Carson, smirked and replied, "Perhaps you underestimate us. We grew up on a planet where every day could be your last. We call it Earth." The Qatar exchanged bewildered glances. Earth? They had never heard of this world. They requested data. What they saw shocked them. Earth was chaos. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. The climate seemed wild even by Taxion standards. Humans lived side by side with creatures capable of tearing them apart. Lions, bears, sharks, venomous snakes, and millions of other deadly life forms. But what shocked the Qatar most was that humans didn't merely survive on this planet. They dominated it. "This is impressive," one Qatar delegate finally admitted. "But how is this possible? Your bodies seem weak, your bones thin. You lack claws, fangs, spines, and even venom." Elizabeth smirked, leaning back in her chair. "We have something better. We adapt. When nature challenges us, we respond. We tamed fire to keep us warm in freezing nights. We built fortresses to protect ourselves from predators. We created weapons to survive and then to win. And most importantly, we learned to work together." With every word, the Qatar began to feel something new: fear. This was not a species that merely survived on a death world. Humans had turned their deadly planet into a testing ground, bending the laws of nature to their will and overcoming them. A few days later, the Qatar requested permission to visit Earth. The humans agreed but warned, "Earth may be dangerous for you." This only intrigued the Qatar further. Could there truly be a world equal to Taxion? They landed in the Amazon rainforest. This was a mistake. A giant anaconda attacked one of the delegates. Venomous ants swarmed another. Then a tropical downpour began, turning the ground beneath their feet into a viscous, deadly trap. Despite all of this, the Qatar refused to retreat, until they noticed that the humans were watching the chaos with subdued amusement. "This isn't even the most dangerous place on Earth," one of the human escorts remarked. "What's the most dangerous?" asked the Qatar leader. "Well, for example, Australia," Elizabeth replied with a smile. "But I wouldn't recommend going there. Even we tread carefully there." The Qatar returned to their flagship in contemplative silence. The leader of the delegation, Rasher, couldn't shake the thought that humans were far more dangerous than he had initially assumed. They not only survived in conditions that would break most species, but seemed to enjoy the challenges their planet threw at them. This blend of cold pragmatism and near-reckless curiosity unsettled him more than any predator on Taxion. At the Qatar Council meeting shortly after their return, the main topic was what to do about humans. Some proposed immediately destroying Earth before humanity could become a threat. However, Rashir knew this would be a catastrophic mistake. Humans had already demonstrated their ability to adapt to any conditions. They didn't just survive, they always found a way to win. They're like a virus, one elder Qatar remarked from the back of the room. They spread, infect, and turn everything they touch into their own environment. They don't just survive catastrophes, they use them to become stronger. Rashir stood to respond. That's true, he agreed. But I've seen something more in them. They don't just adapt. They have something we've lost. They strive to understand. They don't just learn how to win, they learn how to build. They create order from chaos. The room buzzed with debate. Some agreed with Rashir. Others rejected his view entirely. However, one conclusion was clear. Humans were not enemies that could be eliminated with a single strike. They were something unknown and dangerous. A week later, 3 Earth ships entered the atmosphere of Taxion. The Qatar watched their landing with great curiosity. The conditions on the planet were lethal. Wild temperature swings, acidic rains, and dense clouds of methane fog. Most species, even with the protection of advanced technology, couldn't remain on the surface for more than a few hours. But the humans disembarked from their ships as though they were stepping onto a resort. Rashir greeted them personally. Elizabeth Carson emerged first, accompanied by a small group of scientists and soldiers. They were dressed in durable suits designed to protect them from the toxic atmosphere, but they appeared relaxed. One soldier even took a selfie with Taxion's strange triple suns in the background. "Welcome," Rashir said, masking his inner irritation. "I trust your protective gear is strong enough. This air would kill you in 10 seconds. Carson seemed to ignore the veiled challenge in his words. She gestured toward one of the scientists. "We're aware. But thank you for the concern. This is Professor Ethan Langley. He's leading our expedition. He's particularly fascinated by your local ecosystems." The professor stepped forward enthusiastically and began examining the local flora and fauna. He even approached a massive insect with long venomous spines and began taking notes, completely unfazed by the creature's terrifying appearance. "This is incredible," he exclaimed, turning to Carson. "Did you see how effectively its exoskeleton resists the acidic environment? This is a true marvel of evolution." Rashir watched him in disbelief. No Qatar had ever spoken about Taxion with such admiration. To them, their home planet was a battleground, not an object of study. Yet the humans seemed to see every aspect of their world as an opportunity for discovery. Several days passed. The humans adapted faster than anyone had expected. They not only endured Taxion's challenges but managed to collect data, gather samples, and even conduct experiments on site. As the Qatar observed this, they began to experience a strange mix of respect and unease. But the most astonishing event occurred when the humans encountered a swarm of predators known as dracarids. These creatures were the Qatar's worst nightmare. 6-legged monsters with venomous glands, capable of coordinating attacks with terrifying precision. Even the most skilled Qatar hunters often perished without backup when faced with them. The humans, however, did not retreat. Instead, as though acting on instinct, they regrouped almost instantly. Carson gave clear orders, and the Terran soldiers began fighting in unison, using not just their weapons but also the surrounding environment. They set up an ambush, using local carnivorous plants as traps, and despite being outnumbered, they defeated the dracarids. After the battle, Rashir approached Carson, who was standing amidst the fallen predators and jotting down notes on her tablet. "You're strange creatures," he said. "We believed we were the only ones capable of surviving on such worlds. But you seem to enjoy it." Carson laughed, setting down her tablet, and looked him directly in the eyes. "Rashir," she said, "we don't just survive. We find meaning even in chaos. And do you know what I've realized? Taxion isn't just a death world. It's a world of possibilities." That evening, sitting in his quarters, Rashir realized that humans were not merely a threat. They were potential allies, something the Qatar had never sought but perhaps desperately needed. Instead of destroying one another, they could combine their strengths. And that frightened him most of all. In the following days, Rasher spent more time with the Earth delegation than with his own advisors. He became obsessed with understanding the humans, their motivation, their strange ability to dive into mortal danger with what seemed like reckless ease. But the more he observed them, the more he realized that this was not recklessness. It was calculation, fueled by an elusive inner drive that the Qatar lacked. Carson and her team continued to explore Taxion, taking on challenges the Qatar considered insurmountable. They investigated caves filled with toxic gases, climbed volcanoes spewing molten lava, and even dared to descend into the Eye of Traknor, a massive crater inhabited by ancient creatures that even the Qatar avoided. The humans survived. More than that, they thrived. Each of their successes further unsettled Rasher. At one point, he decided to have an honest conversation with Carson. They stood on a high cliff overlooking Taxion's dense forests. Below them, the roar of a massive waterfall echoed as millions of tons of water plunged into a bottomless chasm. "Why do you do this?" he finally asked. "Why isn't survival enough for you? Why go to places where the odds of death are nearly absolute?" Carson, standing at the edge of the precipice, turned to face him with a smile. But her eyes were serious. "You see, Rasher, this is what makes us. We don't just survive because we have to. We strive for something greater. Survival for the sake of survival is stagnation. And we believe that the purpose of life is to learn, to push beyond what's possible." Rasher frowned. Her words were beautiful but seemed reckless. The Qatar had never sought anything greater. Their existence had always revolved around the struggle for dominance. "You speak of risk as if it's nothing," he replied. "But risk destroys the weak." "You're wrong," Carson countered. "Risk is what makes us stronger. Without it, we would stop evolving. And on death worlds like your Taxion or even our Earth, evolution isn't a choice. It's a necessity." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. And for the first time in years, Rasher felt his usual certainty begin to crack. When the humans announced that they were ready to leave Taxion, most of the Qatar breathed a sigh of relief. They still viewed humans as a threat, one that was easier to ignore from a distance. However, Rasher couldn't let them leave so easily. He knew that this encounter would change the future of their civilization, and he feared that the Qatar might not fully realize it yet. On the day of their departure, he boarded the Earthship to personally see Carson off. Her team was already loading samples collected during their time on the planet. They had gathered hundreds of species, conducted dozens of experiments, and left behind an unusual impression. The humans hadn't destroyed but studied, adapted, and left everything as though they had never been there. "You're leaving, but what comes next?" he asked as he approached Carson in the ship's hangar. "Humans aren't the kind to retreat, are they?" She turned to him and, after a brief pause, replied, "We don't retreat. But we're not conquerors either, Rasher. We're looking for allies. We know that planets like Earth and Taxion forge unique species. You call your planet a death world. We call Earth the same. But think about what we could achieve together. Death worlds don't just create strong survivors, they create strong builders. Together, we could build something that would change the galaxy." Rasher stared at her for a long moment. Her words reminded him of old tales from Qatar elders, stories of a time when they still believed in alliances, before their planet had turned them into ruthless individualists. Perhaps deep down, that same yearning Carson spoke of still burned within him. "Maybe," he finally said. "Maybe you're right. But only if humans are truly capable of cooperation, not just bending everything to their will." She smiled. "We can do both," she said with a sly smirk. "It all depends on who stands before us." A few days later, the Earth fleet left Taxion's orbit, leaving behind mixed feelings. Some Qatar were relieved to be rid of a potential threat, while others were troubled by the uncertainty they left behind. But Rasher couldn't stop thinking about Carson's words. He began to wonder how their two species might cooperate. Could their alliance truly become something that would reshape the galaxy? The answer came sooner than he expected. A few months later, a Qatar reconnaissance ship intercepted a distress signal. It came from a vessel of an unknown species trapped in the gravitational pull of a collapsing star that was on the verge of going supernova. Time was running out, The Qatar ship's commander was preparing to leave the sector when an unexpected transmission arrived. A familiar figure appeared on the screen. Elizabeth Carson. "Hello, Rasher," she said, as if they had parted only yesterday. "Care to save a world together? We don't have much time." Rasher barely had a moment to process what was happening, but his instincts, honed by Taxian's brutal environment, provided him with the only possible answer. "Let's try," he replied. And in that moment, a new chapter of their history began. For the first time, humans and Qatar united their strengths. And what they built together surpassed anything even the boldest dream could have imagined.